It was 2:47 in the morning. Rain slammed down like gunfire. Flushing, Queens. Jessie Morgan, 27, a waitress worn past the edge of tired, was locking up the Golden Dragon restaurant when the door chime rang. A boy stepped inside, 6 years old, soaked through, shivering to the bone, a designer coat hanging heavy with water, leather shoes that had once been expensive, now ruined and slick with street grime, and eyes that looked too old for the small face beneath the wet hair. He didn't glance around. He didn't hesitate. He walked straight to her, like nothing else in the room mattered. "Miss, can you walk me home?" No parents in sight. No driver waiting outside. No explanation offered. Just a child alone in a storm, asking a stranger for help. Her gut shouted danger, sharp and immediate. Her heart answered with something quieter, something she couldn't ignore. "Where's your dad, sweetie?" "Working. My driver's car broke down nearby, and I got lost in the crowd." Thunder split the night, close enough to feel in the chest. The boy lifted his hand toward hers. It was ice cold. She took it, and she had no idea she was holding the hand of Asher Vitali, the only heir of Cade Vitali, the most feared mafia boss on the East Coast. One decision, one rainy night. Everything changes. What would you do if a soaked little boy asked you to walk him home at 3 in the morning? Drop your answer below. If you're hooked, hit like, share this with a friend, and subscribe. You won't want to miss what happens next. Jessie led the little boy by the hand as they stepped out of the Golden Dragon restaurant. The rain was still coming down in sheets, and the wind struck her face again and again like hard, stinging slaps. She pulled off her own thin jacket and draped it over Asher's head, shielding him from the storm that howled and raged around them. The streets of Flushing at 3 in the morning lay empty as a graveyard, with only flickering neon spilling down onto pools of black water. Jessie lifted her arm and waved, trying to catch a taxi in the blind, smothering dark. It took 5 long minutes before a yellow cab finally appeared at the far end of the street, its headlights tearing through the night. She opened the door, gently nudged Asher inside, then slid in after him. Rainwater dripped from her clothes onto the leather seat, gathering into a small puddle at her feet. The driver, a middle-aged Indian man, glanced at them in the rearview mirror with curiosity but asked no questions. Jessie turned to Asher. "Where do you live? What's your address?" The boy recited an address on the Upper East Side, his voice still strangely calm. The driver let out a soft whistle. The Upper East Side, the richest part of Manhattan, a place where penthouses cost tens of millions of dollars, and the doormen wore suits that cost more than Jessie made in a month. She swallowed, and a tight, uneasy feeling began to form in her chest. During the 30-minute ride through slick, rain-soaked streets, Asher didn't say a single word. He only sat there, his tiny hand gripping Jessie's hand and not letting go. She could feel how cold his fingers were, how they trembled slightly, not from the chill, but from something deeper. Fear, loneliness, or both. Jessie looked down at his face in the unsteady wash of streetlights. Asher was staring out the window, his eyes empty, as if his thoughts were fixed on some place very far away. She wanted to ask. She wanted to know why a 6-year-old child had been wandering alone in a storm in the middle of the night, why no one was searching for him, why the driver never showed up. But something in those 2 old eyes kept her silent. The taxi came to a stop. Jessie looked up, and her heart seemed to miss a beat. In front of her stood a massive iron gate, at least 4 meters tall, its glossy black spikes reaching toward the sky like the fangs of a monster. Beyond it, a stone-paved drive led to an enormous mansion, the kind she had only ever seen in movies. Security cameras were mounted everywhere, their red lights blinking in the darkness like watchful eyes. Shadows moved behind the fence, quick and silent as ghosts. Jessie paid the fare with the last of the money in her wallet. She stepped out, tugging Asher along, and the taxi door slammed shut behind her. Then the cab vanished back into the night. She stood there, soaked through, shivering, facing the gate of a world she didn't belong to. "Is this your home?" Her voice came out rough. Asher nodded. He walked to the control panel beside the gate, rose onto his toes, and punched in a string of numbers. The iron gate screeched, slowly opening, like the jaws of a beast widening. They stepped inside. Jessie felt as if she were crossing an invisible boundary, leaving her ordinary world and entering someplace entirely different. Each step on the stone path echoed through the hush. Her heartbeat quickened. Something was wrong. She could feel it. Then, without warning, floodlights snapped on from every direction, blindingly bright. Jessie threw up a hand to shield her eyes, seeing nothing but a wash of white. Heavy footsteps thundered closer. Metal clanged. Someone shouted. Dark shapes surged in from everywhere, closing in, surrounding her and Asher in a deadly ring. "Stand still. Let the boy go," a man's voice roared. Jessie looked down. A black gun barrel was aimed straight at her chest. Everything happened too fast. Before Jessie could even open her mouth to explain, a rough hand seized her shoulder, spun her around, and slammed her down to the ground. Her knees struck the wet stone, a sharp pain flashing through her body. Her arms were wrenched behind her back, locked so tight she felt like the bones were about to crack. The rain kept pouring, mixing with the taste of blood from her lip where she'd bitten it when she fell. She lay face down, her cheek pressed to cold stone, gasping, while black leather shoes crowded her vision, closing in like a ring with no way out. "Who gave you permission to lay hands on the young master?" A man's voice thundered right above her, thick with rage and threat. "Who are you? Who sent you here? Talk." Jessie tried to speak, but only a groan came out. A knee drove into her back, forcing her harder into the ground. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't think. She knew only this, that she was about to die here, in a stranger's courtyard, because she had tried to help a lost child. Then a voice rose, small but cutting through the night like thunder. "Stop! Asher!" The 6-year-old stood in the middle of those towering men, eyes red-rimmed, his whole body trembling, yet his voice carried a fierce certainty. "She saved me. She brought me home. Don't hurt her." Everything froze. The men in black looked at one another, confused. The pressure on Jessie's back eased, just a little. She heard whispers around her, questions that weren't spoken aloud. The little young master had never spoken like that. Never. Then another sound came. The heavy wooden door opening, slow and solemn, the measured footsteps on the stone steps. And as if by magic, every man around Jessie stepped back, bowed his head, and fell silent like statues. Jessie lifted her head, trying to see through the rain and the wet hair plastered across her face. She saw a man descending the staircase, tall, very tall, black hair cut short and precise, gray eyes, cold as steel, as ice, as death. He wore a perfect black suit without a single crease, even though it was 3 a.m. in the middle of a storm. Every step he took radiated absolute power, the kind that made armed men lower their eyes, the kind that thickened the air itself. He stopped, looked down at Jessie on the ground, then looked to Asher trembling in the rain. "What is going on?" His voice was low. He didn't shout. He didn't roar. But every word landed like an order that couldn't be refused. A man stepped forward, broad-shouldered, his face carved from stone. "Sir, we saw this woman bringing the little young master in. We suspected kidnapping. We were questioning her." The gray-eyed man didn't look at his subordinate. He walked straight to Asher, lowered to one knee at the boy's level, not caring that the rain was soaking his expensive suit. "Are you hurt?" His voice stayed cold, but Jessie heard something else inside it. Worry, fear, a father's love. Asher shook his head, tears blending with rain on his cheeks. He pointed toward Jessie. "She brought me back, Dad. I got lost. The car never came for me. She found me in the restaurant and brought me home. She didn't do anything wrong." The man rose, his eyes still ice. "Check the cameras, now." 2 minutes later, the man named Barrett returned, his face drained of color. "Sir, the Golden Dragon restaurant cameras confirm it. The young master walked in on his own. This woman let him sit, then led him outside and called a taxi. She was telling the truth." Silence. The gray-eyed man looked down at Jessie still on the ground, soaked through, shaking, her lips turning blue. Let her go. Instantly, the pressure vanished. Jessie was pulled upright, but her knees buckled. She had to steady herself, alone, the way she had always done for 13 years. She stood there, facing the most powerful man she had ever met. He stepped in front of her, a full head taller, looking down with eyes she couldn't read. "Why did you help my son?" Jessie swallowed. Every cell in her body screamed at her to lower her head, to apologize, to beg. But she didn't. She lifted her chin, met those cold gray eyes, and answered in a voice that shook but was not weak. "Because he needed help. I don't need any other reason." Cade looked at Jessie for a few long, endless seconds. Then he turned to Barrett and gave a short nod. Bring her inside. Jessie wanted to refuse, wanted to turn around and leave immediately, but her legs wouldn't listen. She was drained, soaked through, and cold all the way to the bone. She let Barrett guide her through the enormous wooden door and into the mansion. If the outside had been overwhelming, the inside stole her breath completely. The ceiling rose impossibly high, crowned with crystal chandeliers that spilled warm golden light. The marble floors gleamed, reflecting the shapes of people like a mirror. The paintings on the walls looked like they belonged in a museum more than in a home. Her 350-square-foot apartment could have fit into a corner of this living room. An older woman appeared, silver hair pinned into a neat bun, her face stern but her eyes soft when they landed on Asher. Young master. Oh my God, you're soaked. She hurried to the boy, kneeling to check him over. Mrs. DeLuca, take Asher for a hot bath and get him changed. Cade ordered it, his voice still without emotion. Asher hesitated, looking at Jessie with worry. Jessie forced a reassuring smile. Go on, sweetheart. I'm fine. Only then did the boy allow himself to follow the housekeeper, though every few steps he glanced back over his shoulder. When Asher disappeared up the staircase, Cade turned to Jessie. Sit. It wasn't an invitation. It was a command. Jessie sat on a cream-colored leather sofa, feeling out of place like a stain in a flawless room. A servant appeared as if from thin air, set a dry towel and a cup of hot tea in front of her, then vanished without a sound. She lifted the towel and wiped her face, wiped her hair, trying to keep her hands from shaking. Cade sat across from her, one leg crossed over the other, relaxed in posture but with eyes sharp as a blade. He studied her like he was weighing a potential threat. The silence stretched until it felt impossible to breathe. Then Cade drew a thick envelope from the inside pocket of his suit, placed it on the glass table between them, and slid it toward her. Open it. Jessie looked at the envelope, then at him, and didn't move. Cade tilted his head slightly. $100,000. Cash. This is my thanks for bringing my son home safely. $100,000. 20 times what she had managed to save in 5 years. Enough to change her life. Open a small bakery, pay off debt, help Aunt Linda, live without counting every dollar like it was a heartbeat. Cade went on, his voice flat, like he was reading a contract. Everyone has a price, Miss Morgan. I just need to know what yours is. You want more. Say it. Jessie stared at the envelope of money, and then she did something she didn't fully understand herself. She pushed the envelope back toward Cade. I didn't do it for money. For the first time, she saw a flicker of surprise pass through those cold eyes. Only for an instant, then it vanished, but she had seen it. Then what do you want? He asked, his voice lower. A job, a car, a better apartment than the rat hole you're living in. Jessie stood up, her legs still unsteady but her voice firm. I want to go home and sleep. I have to be up at 6 tomorrow morning for work. Cade said nothing. He only looked at her with an expression she couldn't read, as if she were a puzzle he couldn't solve. Small footsteps sounded on the stairs. Asher ran down, wearing blue pajamas, his hair still damp. He went straight to Jessie and wrapped his arms around her leg, as if he was afraid she would disappear. Are you leaving? Will you come visit me? Jessie felt her heart tighten, as if someone had squeezed it in their fist. She knelt to the boy's level and gently smoothed his still wet hair. I don't know, sweetheart. Asher looked at her, his wide eyes full of hope and fear. I want to see you again. Jessie didn't know what to say. She only gave him a sad smile, rose to her feet, and looked toward Cade. Excuse me. Cade watched the scene in silence. For the first time in 4 years, since Catherine had left, his son had reached for a stranger on his own. For the first time, Cade had seen Asher cling to someone, trying to make them stay. He nodded once, signaling Barrett. Get Miss Morgan home safely. Jessie stepped out the door without looking back. The heavy wooden door closed behind her, but inside, by the window, Asher still stood there, watching the black car fade into the night, until there was nothing left to see but darkness and rain. On the way home in Barrett's black car, Jessie sat in silence, staring out through the window. The rain was still falling, long drops sliding down the glass like tears. She kept seeing Asher's eyes when he asked if she would come visit him. That look stirred up memories she had tried to bury a long time ago. Jessie Morgan hadn't always been this alone. There was a time when she had a family, a roof over her head, a normal life like any other kid. Their small Brooklyn apartment wasn't anything special. Paint peeling in places, old wooden floors that creaked whenever someone walked across them. But to Jessie, it was the whole world. Her father, Frank Morgan, worked as an accountant for a construction company. He wasn't rich. He wasn't powerful. He was just an ordinary man with a gentle smile and hands roughened from taking extra work on weekends. Her mother, Susan Morgan, was a nurse at the local hospital. She had brown hair like Jessie's. She laughed the way Jessie laughed, and she carried a warmth Jessie had always hoped she would inherit. They weren't wealthy, but that little apartment was always full of laughter. Every night, the family sat around their small table and told stories about the day. Every weekend, they went on picnics in the park, eating sandwiches her mother made, playing tag until the sun went down. Jessie was an only child, the center of that small, perfect universe. Then, when she was 14, that universe collapsed. Her mother was diagnosed with stage 3 cancer. Their health insurance wasn't enough to cover the crushing cost of chemotherapy. Jessie watched her father change from a cheerful man into a thin, hollow ghost, staying up through the night trying to figure out how to find the money. He took on 2 extra jobs, borrowed from relatives, from friends, and then from people he should never have borrowed from. When every one of those sources ran dry, he began doing something he never believed he could do. He started stealing money from the company. 8 months. That was all the time they had. 8 months of watching her mother wither in a hospital bed. 8 months of hearing her father cry at night when he thought no one could hear. 8 months where hope and despair braided together until Jessie couldn't tell them apart. Her mother died on a winter night, snow falling outside the hospital window. Jessie held her hand until the very last second. The last thing her mother said to her, her voice faint as breath, was, "Never depend on anyone, sweetheart. Promise me." Jessie promised. 2 years later, the police came knocking. Her father was arrested for embezzlement, 15 years in prison. Jessie, 16 years old, stood there and watched them cuff her father and take him away. He didn't look back. Maybe he was too ashamed. Maybe he couldn't bear his daughter's eyes. Jessie was sent into the foster care system. 3 families in 2 years. The first treated her like free help. The second had a father who looked at her in a way that made her lock her bedroom door every night. The third simply didn't care whether she existed at all. In the end, Aunt Linda, her mother's sister, took her in. Her aunt wasn't well off either, cleaning office buildings for a living, surviving in a cramped 1-bedroom apartment. But she gave Jessie something those 3 families never did: real care. From the time she was 16, Jessie started working, washing dishes, running a register, waiting tables, cleaning up. Anything that brought in money. She finished high school on willpower, not luck. College was a luxury dream she didn't dare to think about. Now, at 27, she lived in a 350-square-foot studio in Jamaica, Queens. The walls were so thin she could hear the neighbors fighting. There were so many roaches she'd given them names. But it was her home, paid for with money she earned herself. After 5 years of nonstop work, she had saved $4,500. That money was her small, stubborn dream: a bakery, a place that belonged to her. Every month, she still sent money to Aunt Linda. She didn't love anyone. She didn't trust anyone. She didn't depend on anyone. Just as she had promised her mother, Jessie learned the lesson early. Life gives no one anything for free. If you want to survive, you have to stand on your own 2 feet. 2 weeks passed. Jessie tried to forget that night, as if it had been nothing more than a strange dream. She went back to the Golden Dragon, tied on the familiar black apron, served the familiar customers, and offered the familiar smiles. Everything returned to normal. Or at least, that was what she kept telling herself. Riley, her best friend, Puerto Rican, working the same shift, wouldn't stop pressing her. "Where the hell did you go that night? I called you like 10 times, and you didn't pick up. I thought you were dead." Jessie only shrugged. "I walked a kid home. That's it. End of story." Riley stared at her, suspicious, but she didn't push further. Life kept moving. Work, home, sleep, save, repeat. Jessie counted every dollar, watching the number in her savings account crawl upward as slowly as a turtle. The bakery dream was still far away, but at least she was moving toward it. Then the strange thing started. On the 5th night, after she returned to work, a drunk customer grabbed her wrist while she was clearing a table. "Hey baby, you're pretty. Give me your number." Jessie yanked her hand back, anger flashing in her eyes. "Let go." The drunk man snorted, reaching for her again. But before Jessie could react, two men dressed in black appeared from nowhere. They politely invited the drunk outside, in a way that left no room to refuse. He didn't come back. Jessie stood there with her heart hammering, wondering what she had just witnessed. A few days later, her landlord called. "Miss Morgan, I'm calling to inform you your rent is being reduced by 20% starting next month." Jessie nearly dropped the phone. "Why?" New building policy." He hung up. There was no new policy. Jessie knew that. Then she started noticing the car. A black sedan, parked about 50 meters from her place every night she came home from work. Always the same spot, always the same car. Never moving, never fully turning off its headlights. Fear began to seep into Jessie's mind like poison. She remembered the enormous mansion, remembered the men with guns, remembered the cold eyes of Cade Vitale. She knew too much. She had seen too much. She knew who they were. And in their world, people who knew too much didn't live long. Jessie started buying a pocket knife. She learned how to hold pepper spray so she could use it fast. She stopped taking shortcuts, stopped coming home late, stopped going out alone after dark. Every shadow felt like a threat. Every strange sound made her heart leap. One night, she took Riley's hand and looked her straight in the eye. "I'm serious. If I disappear, you call the cops. Tell them to look for the Vitale people." Riley went pale. "Are you messing with me? What's going on?" Jessie didn't answer. She couldn't live like this forever, waking up in fear every day, falling asleep in dread every night, every second feeling like she was waiting for death to knock on her door. No. Jessie had survived her mother's death, her father going to prison, the foster care system, 11 years of scraping by on her own. She wasn't the kind of person who sat still and waited to die. If they wanted to kill her, she would look them in the eye when they did it. The next night, when her shift ended, Jessie didn't go home. She walked straight toward the black car. She thought they wanted to kill her. She was wrong. The truth was far more surprising. Jessie walked into the night, her heart pounding hard, but her steps steady. The black car sat there, silent as a predator lying in wait, its headlights casting a dull glow across the wet sidewalk. She went straight to it. No hesitation. No looking back. Her hand gripped the pepper spray inside her coat pocket, but she knew it wouldn't mean a thing if they truly wanted her dead. She stopped at the driver's side door, lifted her hand, and rapped the glass hard. Once, twice, 3 times. "Get out." Her voice carried into the night, shaking but not weak. "Do whatever you're going to do. I'm tired of being afraid." Silence stretched for a few seconds that felt like centuries. Then the door opened. Jessie took one step back, tightening her grip on the pepper spray, bracing for the worst. But the man who stepped out wasn't holding a gun. He wasn't holding a knife. It was the man she had met that night. The one with a face carved from stone. The one who had reported to Cade that she was a suspected kidnapper. Barrett Rossi. He climbed out and slowly lifted both hands to shoulder height, palms open, showing he had no weapon. "Miss Morgan, please stay calm. I'm not your enemy." Jessie didn't lower her guard. "Then what are you?" "Following me for 2 weeks. The drunk guy in the restaurant. My rent going down. That was all you, wasn't it?" Barrett lowered his hands and nodded. "Yes. Why? What do you want from me?" "Mr. Vitale gave orders to protect you." Jessie froze, certain she had misheard. "Protect? I don't need anyone protecting me." "And why would he protect me?" Barrett looked at her, and something in his eyes softened, just a little, compared to the coldness she remembered. "Because of young Master Asher." Jessie's heart felt like someone had closed a fist around it. "Asher. Young Master asks about you every day, Miss Morgan. Every day. He asks when Jessie is coming. He asks if Jessie is okay. He asks why Jessie hasn't come back." Jessie swallowed, her throat dry. He misses me. We only met once." Barrett exhaled, as if weighing how much to say. "You're the first person the young master opened up to after his mother died. He doesn't speak to anyone except the boss and Mrs. DeLuca. No friends, no relatives. He's lived like a shadow in that house, until he met you." "How long has his mother been gone?" 4 years. The young master was only 2 when the mistress passed. 4 years. 2 years old. Jessie felt like a punch had landed in her chest. She remembered herself at 14, remembered her mother's cold hand in hers, remembered the hollow moment when she understood she was completely alone in the world. She had still had 14 years with her mother. Asher had only had 2. 2 years so short the boy probably didn't even remember his mother's face. Barrett continued, his voice low. The boss loves the young master more than anything in this world, but he doesn't know how to show it. He doesn't know how to give the boy what he truly needs. He thinks money and protection are enough, but they're not. He paused, looking at Jessie. Then he saw how the young master looked at you. He saw how he held on to you, and he understood that maybe you can give him something he can't. Jessie stood there in the cold night, staring out into the distance as if she could see through the darkness all the way to the mansion on the Upper East Side. Somewhere there, a 6-year-old boy was sitting by a window, waiting for a woman he had met only once, in a night of storm and rain. 2 months had passed since the night Jessie faced Barrett beside that black car. 2 months of thinking, of lying awake, of asking herself what she was supposed to do. In the end, she decided to do the thing she had been dreaming about for years. She withdrew every dollar she had saved, $4,500, borrowed another $3,000 from Aunt Linda, and opened a small bakery, Sugar and Spice, the name she had carried in her mind since she was a teenage girl, back when her mother was still alive and used to bake with her on Sunday afternoons. The shop sat on a quiet corner in Prospect Heights, far from the noise of Flushing, far from the memories of that storm-soaked, life-changing night. It was tiny, only 5 wooden tables and a glass display case for pastries, but to Jessie, it was the whole world. For the first time in her life, she had something that truly belonged to her. The work was brutal. She got up at 4 in the morning to knead dough, bake cakes, and set everything in place before opening at 7. Customers came in, scattered waves, mostly office workers stopping for coffee and croissants before work, a few mothers pushing strollers inside to rest at midday. The revenue still wasn't enough to clear her debts, but at least she was living on her own passion. That afternoon, around 3, when the shop was quiet and Jessie was wiping down the counter, a sleek black limousine pulled up hard in front of the door. She froze, cloth still in her hand, her heartbeat quickening. The car door opened. A boy stepped out, a private school uniform in navy blue, a white shirt, a striped tie set perfectly in place, black hair combed neatly back. And those eyes, too old for his age, the eyes she could never forget. Asher. His face lit up the moment he saw her through the glass. He pushed the door open, ran inside, and before Jessie could say a word, he threw himself into her arms. Miss Jessie, I found you. Jessie stood there, her hands hovering in the air for a few seconds, then slowly lowered them, wrapping the boy in her arms. He was so small, so fragile, and he was holding on to her like she was the only lifeline in a wide, empty sea. Asher, how are you here? The boy looked up, smiling brightly. I kept asking Dad. Dad said you were busy, but I missed you. I missed you so much. Jessie led him to a table near the window and brought out a plate of freshly baked chocolate chip cookies and a mug of hot milk. He ate hungrily, as if this was the best meal he'd ever had, even though she knew he had a private chef at home making food that cost 100 times more. You missed me? Jessie asked softly. We only met once. Asher stopped chewing, lowered his head, and his voice grew smaller. You were the first person who wasn't afraid of me. Afraid of you. Who would be afraid of you? Everyone. He set the cookie down, his gaze drifting into nothing. At school, nobody plays with me. Their parents tell them to stay away. They're afraid of my dad. He paused. At home, it's just Mrs. DeLuca and Dad. But Dad is always busy. Dad never has time. Jessie felt her heart tighten as if someone had wrapped a hand around it. A 6-year-old boy with all the money in the world, and so lonely that one act of kindness from a stranger, one time, had become something he couldn't let go of. Do you miss your mom? The question slipped out before Jessie could stop it. She wanted to pull it back instantly, but it was too late. Asher was quiet for a long time. Then he shook his head. I don't remember her face. I try, but I can't. I only remember the smell. Lavender. Sometimes I smell it somewhere and I think Mom is close, but she isn't. Jessie felt tears rise. She swallowed hard, trying to keep her voice steady. I lost my mom too. I know what that feels like. Asher lifted his head, his eyes wide. Really? You don't have a mom either? Jessie nodded, and she didn't trust her own voice anymore. She watched his eyes begin to redden, watched his mouth tremble, watched the wall he had built for 4 years start to crumble. Then Asher cried. Not loudly, not with sobs, just silent tears sliding down his cheeks, falling onto his perfect school uniform, falling onto the half-eaten cookie. I was never allowed to cry, he said, his voice thick. Dad says men don't cry. Dad says, Vitaly, men don't cry. Jessie didn't speak. She stood, walked around the table, knelt beside him, and pulled him into her arms. Cry, it's okay, I'm here. And Asher cried, for the first time in 4 years, in the arms of a woman he barely knew, a stranger he had met only once on a night of storm and rain. He cried for a mother whose face he couldn't remember, for a loneliness he didn't have words for the years he had been forced to pretend he was strong when he was only a 6-year-old boy. Outside the window, Barrett stood beside the limousine, watching from the curb. He turned away, pulled out his phone, and dialed. Boss, there's something you need to know. 1 week after that afternoon, Asher came to the bakery 2 more times. Each time, the black limousine pulled up out front. The boy ran in with a bright smile on his face, and Jessie felt her heart warm a little. He was happier. He laughed more. He talked more. He was no longer that silent shadow with eyes too old for his age, but slowly became what he was meant to be, a 6-year-old child in the truest sense. Jessie taught him how to make cookies, let him stand on a stool so he could reach the work table, his tiny hands kneading dough clumsily, but with pure excitement. She told him fairy tales, about a sleeping princess in the woods, about a prince on a white horse, about happy endings that real life rarely gives. She helped him with homework, surprised by how smart he was, reading words that most 6-year-olds still struggled to sound out. Every afternoon when Asher left, he hugged Jessie tight and asked the same question. Can I come tomorrow? And every time, she nodded. Thursday afternoon, around 4, Jessie was wiping down tables when she heard the familiar sound of an engine outside, but when she looked up, she didn't see the black limousine. Instead, a sleek black Maserati was parked at the curb, so expensive it looked out of place on this quiet street. The door opened. Cade Vitaly stepped out. Alone. No bodyguards. No Barrett. Just him. In a flawless gray suit. Black hair slicked back. And steel eyes fixed on her bakery. Jessie felt the air thicken. Her hand clenched the cleaning cloth so hard her knuckles went white. He pushed the door open and walked in. The little bell chimed, but that cheerful sound suddenly felt ominous in this moment. Cade stood by the entrance, scanning her small shop. The worn wooden tables, the glass display case, the flower prints she had hung on the wall to hide a crack. Then he looked at her. Miss Morgan. Mr. Vitaly. Her voice came out calmer than she expected. Tension spread like invisible fog. The 2 customers sitting inside sensed something, exchanged a look, then quietly stood up, left cash on the table, and walked out without a word. Cade moved to the table by the window where Asher usually sat, and he sat down. He didn't ask permission. Men like him never did. Jessie hesitated for a second, then went over and sat across from him. They looked at each other in silence. Cade spoke first. You've changed, my son. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. Jessie shook her head. I didn't do anything. I just listened to him. That is what I can't do. His voice dropped, and for a brief flicker Jessie saw something in those cold eyes. Pain, helplessness, guilt. Then it was gone, as quickly as it had appeared. Jessie didn't know what to say, so she stayed quiet. Cade continued, his voice returning to its familiar coldness. You know who I am. You know what I do. Why do you still let Asher come here? Jessie met his gaze without blinking. Because Asher isn't you. He's just a 6-year-old child who needs someone to love him. What you do, who you are, has nothing to do with him. Silence. Cade watched her with an unreadable expression. Jessie knew she had just said something no one else probably dared to say to him. But she didn't care. It was the truth. Then Cade spoke, his tone flat, like he was discussing a business contract. I want you to be Asher's tutor, officially. Salary, $8,000 a month. Jessie almost choked. $8,000. 3 times what she made from the bakery in her best months. $8,000 for what? Teach him. Play with him. Give him what I'm not capable of giving. Jessie shook her head and stood up. I don't want to get tangled up in your world. Cade stood too, nearly a head taller, looking down at her with those penetrating eyes. You got tangled up the night you did it, Miss Morgan. The moment you took my son's hand and brought him home. The question now is whether you keep running or you face it. He pulled a black business card from his suit pocket and set it on the table. Think about it. Call me when you decide. Then he turned, walked out of the shop, got back into the car, and disappeared into the evening traffic. Jessie stood there, staring at the business card on the table as if it were a bomb waiting to go off. 5 minutes later, the doorbell rang again. Asher ran in, his cheeks flushed, breathing hard. Miss Jessie, did Dad come? What did Dad say to you? Are you mad at him? Jessie looked at the boy, at eyes full of worry and hope, and she didn't know how to answer. That night, Jessie couldn't sleep. She lay on the narrow bed in her cramped apartment, eyes fixed on the ceiling stained with patches of damp, her fingers holding Cade Vitali's black business card, silver letters embossed against the black, only a name and a phone number, no title, no address. Men like him didn't need those things. She turned the card over and over for night after night, thinking, twisting in her sheets, asking herself what she was doing. In the end, she called Riley. Are you insane? Riley's voice came through the phone, shrill, practically shouting. Mafia. Mafia. Have you ever watched a movie? People die like flies in those worlds. You want to end up a body floating in the Hudson River. Jessie exhaled. I know, but Asher isn't your kid, Riley cut in, sharp. He's the son of a mafia boss. He's got an army protecting him. He doesn't need you. Don't let your feelings blind you, Jessie. I'm serious. This isn't a joke. Jessie knew Riley was worried about her. She knew her friend was right, by ordinary logic. But every time Jessie closed her eyes, she didn't see guns or danger. She saw Asher's eyes when he cried in her arms. She saw his smile when he made his first cookie. She saw the way he clung to her every time he arrived and every time he left, as if he was terrified she would vanish. Jessie ended the call with Riley and called Aunt Linda. She told her everything, from the beginning to the end. The night of rain, the lost boy, the mansion, the mafia boss, the offer. Aunt Linda listened in silence, not interrupting, not judging. When Jessie finished, the quiet lasted for a few seconds. Then her aunt spoke, gently. You love that boy. I can hear it in your voice. Jessie felt her eyes burn. What do you think I should do? I think you've already decided, sweetheart. You just need someone to give you permission. Silence. Jessie couldn't find words. Aunt Linda sighed on the other end of the line. Be careful, Jessie. Keep your boundaries. And remember the way home. Always remember the way home. That night, Jessie sat alone by the window, looking out at the empty street. She thought about Asher, about the way he smiled when he ate chocolate chip cookies, about how his eyes lit up when she told him fairy tales, about the eager sound of him saying Miss Jessie every time he walked into the shop. She thought about him crying in her arms. 4 years of tears held back, the tears of a child who wasn't allowed to be a child. Then she thought about herself, 14 years old, standing in a hospital, watching her mother close her eyes for the last time. No one held her. No one told her it was okay to cry. She had faced that pain alone, grown up alone, hauled herself up alone every time she fell. If someone had been there for her then, if she could be that someone for Asher. Jessie picked up her phone, looked at the business card one last time, and dialed the number. The line rang twice. Miss Morgan. Cade's voice came through, not surprised, as if he had been waiting for this call. Mr. Vitale. I agree. A short silence. But I have conditions. Jessie took a slow breath. I keep the bakery. I come to your house 3 afternoons a week, and you don't get to order me around like an employee. I'm coming for Asher, not for your money. The silence stretched. Jessie held her breath, waiting. Then Cade's voice came back, still cold, but with something else inside it. Fine. 6 months passed faster than Jessie expected. 3 afternoons a week, she went to the Vitale mansion on the Upper East Side, walking through the massive iron gate that no longer frightened her the way it once had. She helped Asher with homework, still surprised by how sharp he was, how much his mind seemed to run ahead of his age. She played board games with him, losing on purpose just to see that bright, victorious grin spread across his small face. She taught him how to bake in an enormous kitchen that the Vitale family's private chef surrendered with clear reluctance, his mouth set in a hard line, but he didn't dare say a word. She told him fairy tales before bed, sitting beside him until his breathing evened out and his eyes finally closed. Mrs. DeLuca had looked at Jesse with suspicion at first. The older housekeeper had been with the Vitale family since before Asher was born, had watched Mistress Catherine slip away, had cared for the young master with her own hands for 4 long years. She didn't trust strangers, especially not a young woman who appeared out of nowhere and was suddenly allowed by the boss to get close to the most precious boy in that house. But then she saw the way Jesse looked at Asher, saw the way she held him, saw the way she listened to every scrap of his little stories, as if each one was the most important thing in the world. After 1 month, Mrs. DeLuca started making tea for Jesse whenever she came. After 2 months, she began setting an extra plate at dinner. After 3 months, she took Jesse's hand and said, her voice trembling, "You are the best thing that has happened to the young master. Thank you." Jesse also began to observe Cade's world. She saw the closed-door meetings in his office, the thick wooden door shut tight, but not enough to fully swallow the harsh voices inside. She saw men in expensive suits walk in with fear on their faces, then walk out either relieved or pale as a corpse. She saw Barrett and the security team always on edge, hands never far from their jacket fronts where she knew they kept their guns. She saw the midnight phone calls, the sudden trips, the bruises that sometimes appeared on Cade's hands and that he never explained. But she saw other things too. She saw Cade come home earlier on the days she was there, as if he wanted to see his son before the boy went to sleep. She saw him sit by Asher's bed and read in that low voice whenever the boy asked, even though Jesse knew he had to be exhausted after a full day dealing with the underworld. She saw the way he looked at his son sleeping, those eyes softening into the eyes of a father who loved his child. Then one night, Jesse's phone rang at 11. The mansion's number. "Miss Morgan, the young master has a high fever. He keeps calling your name." Mrs. DeLuca's voice shook. Jessie didn't even remember how she got dressed and left her apartment. She only knew that 20 minutes later she was sitting beside Asher's bed, holding the boy's hand that burned with heat, wiping sweat from his forehead with a cool cloth. He was delirious, calling for Mom through the fever, and Jessie's heart felt like it was being torn in two. She stayed up all night, changing the cloth every 15 minutes, whispering stories into his ear even though she didn't know if he could hear, singing the lullabies her mother used to sing to her when she was little. She was so tired she didn't even know when her head finally slipped down beside the bed. Cade came home at 3 in the morning. He stood in the doorway of his son's room and took in the scene. Jessie asleep with her head bowed beside the bed, her hand still holding Asher's, her hair fallen across her face, her breathing steady in pure exhaustion. He stood there for a long time, looking at her with an expression that, if she had been awake, she wouldn't have understood. Then he stepped forward, took a blanket from the sofa chair, and gently laid it over her. He sat down in the chair across the room and kept watch over both of them until dawn. Jessie woke when the first sunlight slipped through the curtains. She startled when she saw Cade sitting opposite her, eyes open, as if he hadn't slept at all. "You were here all night. You were too." She looked down at Asher. His breathing was steady, his cheeks no longer flushed. The fever had broken. Relief rushed through her. Silence stretched between them. Then Cade spoke, his voice low, as if he was talking more to himself than to her. "You're like her. Not how you look. The way you love Asher." Jessie's heart began to beat faster. "Her. Your wife." Cade nodded, his eyes still on his sleeping son. "Catherine. She died when Asher was 2. I'm sorry. Cancer." Cade's voice stayed even, but Jessie heard the pain beneath it. "We found it too late. I have all the money in the world, Miss Morgan. I can buy anything, buy anyone, but I couldn't buy one more day for her." Jessie felt as if someone had punched her in the chest. Her mother. Also cancer. Also not enough money. Also gone. Cade looked at her. "Barrett told me your mother also." Jessie nodded, unable to speak. Her throat tightened. "I'm sorry." Cade said it, and Jessie knew he meant it. They sat in silence, both of them watching Asher sleep, both of them thinking of the women they had lost. For the first time, Jessie no longer saw Cade Vitale as a terrifying mafia boss. She only saw a man who had lost his wife, who didn't know how to raise a child alone, who was doing his best in the only way he knew. 1 month after the night Jessie stayed awake beside Asher's bed, word of her began to reach ears that had no business knowing. Giovanni Marchetti, the rival mafia boss opposed to the Vitale family, Heard that Cade had a new woman in his orbit. Not a lover, not a wife, but important enough that he protected her. Important enough to become a weakness. That afternoon, Jessie closed Sugar and Spice at 6 the way she always did. She stepped into the narrow alley behind the shop, where she kept the trash bins, and 2 dark figures blocked her path. 2 big men in black suits, faces cold and carved from stone. Jesse Morgan. One of them spoke, his voice like metal scraping. Stay away from Cade Vitale. This is your only warning. Jessie's heart kicked into chaos. She swallowed, trying to keep her voice from shaking. I don't know who you are. You don't need to know. You just need to listen. The other man stepped forward, a full head taller than her. Next time we see you, it won't be words. Then they turned and vanished into the shadows, as if they had never been there at all. Jessie stood there shaking, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break out of her chest. She thought about calling Cade, thought about telling Barrett. Then she shook her head. She didn't want to make it bigger than it was. She didn't want to be seen as a burden. She didn't want Cade thinking she was weak, needing protection like a child. It's just threats, she told herself when she got back to her small apartment. Locked the door tight, checked the windows 3 times before she went to bed. It'll be fine. 1 week later, they came back. This time not in a dark alley. This time right in front of her bakery, in broad daylight, after the last customer had just left. Those 2 men walked in, closed the door behind them, and flipped the sign from open to closed. You didn't listen, the first one said, his voice colder than before. This time, no warning. The second man moved closer. Jessie backed up until her shoulders hit the wall. Nowhere left to run. She looked around for something. Anything she could use. But there was nothing except wooden chairs and a fragile glass counter. The man lifted his hand, and Jessie thought this was the moment she died. But instead of fear, something else flared inside her. Rage. She had been afraid her whole life. Afraid of losing her mother. Afraid of losing her father. Afraid of being abandoned. Afraid of not having enough money. Afraid of failure. She had lived in fear for too long. She didn't want to be afraid anymore. Jessie drew in a deep breath, clenched her fists, and looked the man straight in the eye. You think I'm scared? They stopped, surprised by the steadiness in her voice. I lost my mother when I was 14. My father went to prison when I was 16. I survived the foster care system. Moved from house to house like something nobody wanted. I slept on the street when I had nowhere left to go. I worked 16 hours a day just to afford an apartment the size of a matchbox. She stepped forward, and the man flinched back without meaning to. You think a few threats will make me run. I'm not some rich girl wrapped in silk. I'm a survivor. I lived through hell, and I'm still standing here. She stared them down without blinking. Go tell your boss I'm not going anywhere. The 2 men looked at each other, and something like respect flashed across their eyes. Then, without another word, they turned, walked out of the shop, and disappeared. Jessie stood there until she was sure they were gone, and then her knees gave out, and she sank to the floor. Her whole body trembled out of control, but she didn't cry. She didn't allow herself to cry. She didn't know Barrett had been watching her for a long time, under Cade's orders. She didn't know the camera inside the shop had recorded everything. She didn't know that 2 hours later, Cade Vitale watched that video, and his face became more terrifying than it had ever been. The black Maserati pulled up hard in front of the shop at 8 that night, when Jessie was sitting alone in the darkness, not even bothering to turn on the lights. Cade walked in and slammed the door behind him. Why didn't you tell me? His voice was ice. Jessie stood, her face going hard. Because I don't need you to protect me. I can handle myself. You don't understand. Cade stepped closer, eyes lit with anger. Marchetti doesn't bluff. They've killed people. They can hurt you anytime they want. So what? Jessie shouted back, all her restraint shattering. I'm not your person. I don't belong to you. Cade slammed his hand down on the table, hard enough to make the small vase jump. You belong to Asher. Silence. Jessie stood there, breathing fast, staring at him. Cade turned away, his voice dropping, almost a whisper. And I can't take losing anyone else. Jessie's anger drained out of her. Catherine, too. Cade went on, his back still to her. She didn't tell me either when she was hurting. She hid it, hid the symptoms, because she didn't want me to worry. By the time I knew, it was too late. Late stage. Nothing left to save. Jessie felt her heart tighten until it hurt. I'm sorry. I didn't think about. Cade turned back to her. And for the first time, she saw real fear in those eyes. Not fear of enemies, not fear of dying, fear of loss. From now on, anything that happens, you tell me. Okay. Jessie nodded, not trusting her own voice. 2 weeks after the night they argued in the bakery, everything changed. Jessie didn't know what Cade had done to the men who threatened her, and she didn't ask. She only knew they never appeared again, and that Barrett and 2 other guards started following her 24/7, from the moment she left her apartment until the moment she returned. At first, it made her feel trapped, but little by little she got used to their quiet presence. Life went on. She still opened the bakery every morning, still went to the Vitale mansion 3 afternoons a week, still helped Asher with schoolwork, and told him stories before he fell asleep. But something shifted between her and Cade. The looks that lingered longer than they needed to. The moments their hands brushed by accident when they were both beside Asher. The times Cade came home earlier than usual, as if he wanted to see her before she left. The silence between them wasn't heavy and sharp anymore. It became something easy, something calm, as if they didn't need words to understand each other. That night, after Asher was asleep, Jessie didn't leave right away like she usually did. She walked out into the garden behind the mansion, sat on the stone bench beside the fountain, and tipped her face up toward the night sky. New York City rarely showed many stars, but tonight the air was unusually clear, and the stars glittered like diamonds scattered across black velvet. She heard footsteps behind her and didn't need to turn to know who it was. Cade sat down beside her, not too close, but not too far. They sat in silence for a long time, both looking up. "You're not leaving," Cade spoke first. "I'm waiting for a taxi. Let me drive you." "No." The silence returned, but neither of them moved. Then Cade said, his voice low, like a confession, "I don't know how to do this." Jessie turned to look at him. "Do what?" Cade didn't look at her, his eyes still on the sky, though Jessie knew he wasn't really looking at the stars, caring about someone. "After Catherine, I shut everything down. I thought it would be safer that way. If you don't love anyone, you can't lose anyone. If you don't trust anyone, you can't be betrayed." Jessie understood. She understood better than almost anyone. "Me too," she said, her voice soft as wind. "After I lost my mother, lost my father, I didn't trust anyone anymore. I built walls around myself and I didn't let anyone in." Cade turned to her. "But you trust Asher. Asher is a child. Children don't know betrayal. They love with their whole hearts, without calculation, without conditions." Silence. Then Cade asked, his voice rougher, "What about me?" Jessie looked into his eyes. In the pale moonlight, she didn't see the terrifying mafia boss the entire East Coast feared. She saw a lonely man who had lost the person he loved, who had kept his heart sealed for 4 years, and who was afraid now, afraid of rejection, afraid of opening up and being hurt again. I want to trust you," she whispered. Cade lifted his hand, slowly, as if he was afraid she would pull away. His fingers touched her cheek, gentle, tentative. Jessie didn't pull back. She leaned into his palm and closed her eyes, feeling warmth spread from his fingertips. Then Cade bent down, and their lips met. The first kiss wasn't fierce, wasn't like the movies, all heat and hunger. It was soft, hesitant, as if both of them were afraid of breaking something fragile. Like 2 people who had forgotten how to love were learning again from the beginning, one small step at a time, one breath at a time. When they parted, Jessie saw Cade's eyes were wet. She didn't ask why. She didn't need to. She rested her head on his shoulder, and he wrapped an arm around her. They stayed that way in the quiet garden, under a sky full of stars, until dawn brushed the horizon pink. 2 months after that night in the garden, Jessie officially moved into the Vitale mansion. She still kept sugar and spice, still woke at 4 in the morning to knead dough and bake, but every night she came home to Cade and Asher, instead of the lonely apartment in Jamaica. Asher was the happiest of all. The moment he heard, he ran through the house, wrapped his arms around Jessie's legs, and asked again and again, "Miss Jessie, can you stay forever? You're not leaving again, right?" Jessie knelt, held him close, and nodded. "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." A new life began. Strange, lavish, and sometimes still so unreal Jessie felt like she must be dreaming. But there was one thing she hadn't done yet. One thing she knew she had to do if this relationship was going to be truly serious. She needed to take Cade to meet Aunt Linda. "Are you sure?" Cade asked when Jessie told him what she intended. "Does she know who I am?" "My aunt isn't easy to fool." Jessie met his eyes. "She'll find out if she doesn't already. But if we're serious, she needs to know. She's the only family I have left." Cade was quiet for a moment, then he nodded. That Sunday afternoon, the black Maserati pulled up in front of an old apartment building in Crown Heights. Jessie looked through the window and saw the familiar cracks in the walls, the rusted fire escape, the children playing on the sidewalk. This was where she had grown up after leaving foster care, where Aunt Linda had given her a home when no one else wanted her. Aunt Linda's apartment was small and plain, as far from the Vitale mansion as night from day, but it was clean, warm, and filled with the smell of roasted chicken drifting from the kitchen. Aunt Linda had cooked dinner, the way Jessie knew she would. Roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, a green salad. Simple food, but made with love. Asher sat politely at the table, calling her ma'am with careful respect when Aunt Linda asked if he was hungry. Cade tried to act normal, but the expensive suit and the watch on his wrist stood out in this modest apartment. He wasn't comfortable, and Aunt Linda saw it. She saw everything. Through dinner, Aunt Linda didn't say much. She simply watched, sharp eyes looking straight through Cade as if she were reading each page of the book of his life. Jessie tried to keep the mood light, talking about the bakery, about Asher's progress in school. But she knew the storm was coming. After dinner, when Cade and Asher sat in the small living room watching television, Aunt Linda pulled Jessie into the kitchen. She closed the door, and her face turned grave. "Do you know what he does?" Jessie drew in a slow breath. "Aunt. Don't aunt me." Aunt Linda's voice went hard. "He's mafia. He's a criminal. He's the kind of thing that destroyed your father's life." Jessie felt like she had been slapped. "Cade isn't like my father. He isn't weak. Weak." Aunt Linda let out a bitter laugh. "Your father was weak, and that's why he went to prison. This man, he's dangerous. And that danger will pull you into prison too. Or worse, into a coffin. You don't understand." "I understand." Aunt Linda cut her off, her eyes shining. "I see how you look at him. I see how you look at that boy. You love them. I know you do. But love doesn't protect you from bullets, Jessie. Love doesn't stop his enemies from coming for you." Silence. Jessie didn't know what to say. Then Aunt Linda sighed, her voice softening, tired and sad. "I lost my sister to sickness. I lost my brother-in-law to prison. You are the only thing I have left of my sister. You are everything I have." She looked at Jessie, her eyes wet. "I'm afraid of losing you." Jessie stepped forward and wrapped her aunt in a tight embrace. "I understand. I understand why you're scared. But I've chosen, Aunt Linda. I love them. I can't leave them." Aunt Linda held her niece and let out a heavy breath. "Then promise me, if anything happens, anything at all, you run, you come back here." "Okay, I promise." Footsteps sounded behind them. They both turned and saw Cade standing in the kitchen doorway, his face blank but his eyes saying everything. He had heard it all. "Linda," his voice was low, measured. "I know I don't deserve your niece. I know my world is dangerous, but I will protect her with my life. That is my promise." Aunt Linda looked at him for a long time, sharp eyes weighing every line of his face. Then she spoke, her voice still cold but no longer openly hostile. "Words are easy. Actions are hard. I'll be watching to see if you can do it." 3 years passed. In the year 2022, Jessie had become a part of the Vitale family that couldn't be separated from the rest. She and Cade weren't officially married, but in every way that mattered most, she was Asher's mother. Sugar and Spice had opened a second location in Manhattan. Asher was 9 now, taller, brilliant, and happier than anyone could have imagined when compared to the lonely boy Jessie met on that rainy night long ago. But a dark cloud was gathering. Giovanni Marchetti, the old enemy who had never forgotten the grudge, had spent 3 years building an alliance. He pulled in other mafia families, men jealous of Cade's power, men who wanted a bigger share of the pie, men with personal vendettas they'd been nursing in silence. They wanted to topple the Vitale empire, and Marchetti wanted Cade's head served on a silver platter. Jessie felt the shift before she could even see it. Cade started coming home later, sometimes not returning until the sky was close to morning. He looked more exhausted, gray eyes bruised with sleepless shadows, his face stretched tight like a wire ready to snap. He grew colder, quieter. often shutting himself in his office for hours with the door closed. He stopped reading to Asher at bedtime. The private meetings became constant. Tense-faced men moving in and out of the mansion like a revolving door. The security detail doubled. Barrett was always at Cade's side, his hand never far from the gun under his jacket. The air in the house turned heavy, the way it does right before a storm breaks. Asher felt it. One night, when Jesse was tidying his room after he was supposed to be asleep, Asher suddenly sat up, worry shining in the dark. "Mom, is Dad okay?" Jessie froze. Her heart seemed to miss a beat. "Mom." It was the first time Asher had called her that. Not Miss Jessie like before. "Mom." She tried to swallow the hard knot in her throat, sat down beside his bed, and smoothed his hair back. "Dad is busy, sweetheart." "I'm scared," Asher whispered, his voice trembling. "I'm scared Dad will leave and not come back, like Mom Catherine." Jessie held him tight, feeling as if her heart were tearing in two. She couldn't let this keep going. She couldn't sit still and watch her family crack apart, watch Cade grind himself down, watch Asher live inside fear every day. That night, when Cade came home at 2 a.m, Jessie was waiting in his office. He stopped when he saw her, surprised. "You're not asleep. You can't keep doing this," Jessie said, straight and sharp. No circles, no softness. "Doing what?" "This. Coming home at 2 a.m. every night, not looking at your son, not talking to me." "You're killing yourself, Cade." Cade exhaled, worn down to the bone. "You don't understand. This is war, Jessie. If I don't act, Marchetti will destroy all of us." "I do understand." Jessie stepped closer and took his hand. "I understand more than you think. And I understand that if the war truly breaks out, Asher will lose his father. I'll lose you. Is that the price you want to pay?" Cade pulled his hand back, his eyes turning cold. "So what do you want me to do?" "Get on my knees and beg them to spare us. Hand over territory and wait to die." "I want you to negotiate." Cade laughed, but there wasn't a single ounce of humor in it. "Negotiate. With Marchetti. He wants my head on a plate. Don't you get it?" "He does." Jessie didn't flinch. "But what about his wife? What about his family? They have children too, Cade. They have something to lose too." Cade stared at her, gray eyes narrowing. "What are you planning?" "I'm going to meet Rosa Marchetti. Women talk to women. You men only know guns and fists, but women understand each other. She's a mother too. She doesn't want to lose her husband, lose her child in this meaningless war either." "No!" Cade roared, loud enough that Jessie instinctively stepped back. "Are you out of your mind? That's suicide. You think Marchetti will let his wife meet you and then send you home in one piece. You'll be dead before you finish one sentence. War is suicide." Jessie drew a slow breath and held his gaze. "I'm not asking permission, Cade. I'm telling you." A tense silence swallowed the room. Cade looked at her, eyes filled with pain and fear. "You know if you go, I can't protect you." "I know," Jessie nodded. "But if I don't go, there won't be anything left to protect." Cade couldn't sleep that night. He sat in his office, watching Jessie sleep through the security camera, and he thought, she was right. He knew she was right. War never had winners, only people who lost less. And with the alliance Marchetti had built, he wasn't sure he'd be the one who lost less. The next morning, he called Jessie into his office. "I agree." Jessie stared at him, not trusting her ears. I agree to let you meet Rosa Marchetti," Cade said, his voice heavy. "But there are conditions. Neutral ground, a public place, daylight, and maximum security. Barrett and his team will be nearby, not in sight, but close enough to intervene if anything happens." Jessie nodded. "Okay. And you promise me." Cade took her hand, his eyes full of worry. "If there's any sign of danger, you run. You're not a hero. You're not a sacrifice. You run. Okay, I promise." 3 days later, everything was arranged. An Italian restaurant in Brooklyn, neutral territory that belonged to neither side, was chosen. Noon, broad daylight, when the restaurant would be crowded with lunch customers, Rosa Marchetti agreed to meet, maybe out of curiosity, maybe because she too was tired of the war that was coming. Jessie walked into the restaurant alone, as agreed. She dressed simply, a navy blue dress and a white coat. No expensive jewelry, nothing that spoke of Vitali wealth. She wanted Rosa to see who she really was, not a mafia queen, just an ordinary woman. Rosa Marchetti was already seated at a corner table, positioned to watch the entire room. She was around 40, black hair cut short and precise, a face cold as ice, and sharp black eyes filled with suspicion. 2 bodyguards stood behind her, arms folded, their gaze never leaving Jessie. Jessie walked over and sat across from Rosa. The 2 women studied each other in silence. Rosa spoke first, her tone edged with mockery. "Are you Cade Vitale's daughter? Or his newest mistress?" Jessie didn't flinch. "No, I'm the one trying to keep both of us from becoming widows." Rosa lifted an eyebrow, then let out a cold laugh. "And who do you think you are? Coming here to talk about peace. Do you know how deep the hatred runs between my husband and Cade Vitale? Do you know how many people have died because of this war?" "I do," Jessie nodded. "And I know more will die if no one is willing to stop." "Then who are you?" Rosa tilted her head, watching Jessie as if she were studying a strange species. "You don't look like the women in this world." "Because I'm not from this world." Jessie met her gaze. "I'm nobody. I'm a night shift waitress at a Korean restaurant in Flushing. 4 years ago, I found Cade Vitale's son alone at 3 in the morning. I walked him home, and my life changed from that moment on." Rosa's surprise showed on her face. This wasn't the story she expected. Jessie continued. "I wasn't born into your world. I don't understand your rules. I don't know who owes whose blood, who betrayed who first. But I understand one thing. War has no winners. Only people who lose less. And no matter who wins, children will still lose their fathers. Wives will still lose their husbands. Mothers will still cry over their children's coffins." Silence. Rosa didn't speak, but Jessie saw something shift in those cold black eyes. "My husband won't stop," Rosa finally said, her voice lower. "He swore to destroy Vitale. It's his honor. I'm not asking him to stop," Jessie said. "I'm asking you to think about your child." Rosa froze. "You have a 7-year-old son," Jessie went on, her voice gentle but steady. "I know. His name is Marco. He goes to St. Augustine. He likes soccer, and he has a dog named Biscuit." Rosa went pale. "I'm not threatening you," Jessie said quickly. "I just want you to know, I understand. I understand because Asher is the same. A 9-year-old boy who's afraid every night, asking me if his father will come home. He lost his mother when he was 2. He can't lose anyone else." The silence stretched on. Rosa stared down at the table, her hands clenched together. "My son," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "He's afraid every time my husband leaves the house. Every morning he asks, 'Will Dad come back?' Every night he can't sleep until he hears my husband's car pull up." "Asher too," Jessie said, her voice thick. "Every night." The 2 women looked at each other, and in that moment, they weren't enemies. They were just 2 mothers, loving their children, terrified of losing what they loved. "What do you want?" Rosa asked, her voice softened now. "A meeting," Jessie said, "between Cade and Giovanni. No guns, no bodyguards, no threats. Just talk. 2 men sit down and find a way to end this before it's too late." Rosa shook her head. "My husband won't listen to me. He loves you," Jessie said. "I can see it in the way he protects you, in the way he keeps you far from danger. He will listen, if you say it the right way. If you show him this isn't about honor or territory, but about family." Rosa was quiet for a long time. Then she stood, looking down at Jessie. "I'm not promising anything, but I will think about it." Jessie stood too. "That's all I'm asking." Rosa turned away and walked out with her 2 guards following. But before she left the restaurant, she stopped, glanced back at Jessie one last time. "You're brave, waitress, or you're crazy. I haven't decided which." Then she was gone. Outside, Cade was waiting in the car, his face pulled tight with strain. When Jessie stepped out, he moved to her immediately. "What happened? Are you okay?" Jessie gave a tired smile. "She'll think about it. Nothing is certain yet." Cade pulled her into his arms, holding her tight as if he was afraid she'd disappear. "You're insane. You know that. Maybe?" Jessie whispered against his shoulder, but sometimes it takes a little insanity to change everything. 2 weeks later, the news came. Giovanni Marchetti agreed to meet Cade Vital. 2 years passed after that fateful meeting with Rosa Marchetti. The negotiations between Cade and Giovanni stretched on for months, tense, strained, filled with moments that felt like they might collapse at any second. but in the end, they reached an agreement. Territory was redrawn, interests were balanced, and most importantly, there was no war. No blood spilled, no widows, no orphaned children. Jessie never appeared in the official talks, but everyone knew she was the one who had opened the first door. In the underworld, people began calling her by a new name, the Mediator. The small waitress from Flushing had done what decades of bargaining between powerful bosses had never managed to do. In the year 2024, life was steadier than it had ever been. Asher was 11 now. Tall, strong, the top student in his class, and most important, happy. He was no longer a silent shadow with eyes too old for his age. He laughed more, talked more, had friends, and every night he still asked Jessie to tell him a story before bed, even though he was already getting big. Sugar and Spice had opened a second location on the Upper East Side, close to the Vitale mansion. Jessie hired employees from poor neighborhoods, giving them chances the way someone had once given her a chance. She wanted to give back to life what she had been given. Cade changed too. He was less tense, came home earlier, smiled more. He made time for Asher, read to his son every night the way he used to, played ball with him on weekends, and looked at Jessie with an expression she never thought she would see in those eyes. Love. One late autumn night, when golden leaves covered the streets of New York, Cade told Jessie to dress up. "I want to show you something," he said, mysterious. Jessie wondered but didn't ask. She put on the red dress Cade liked, wore the pearl earrings he'd given her for her birthday, and climbed into the familiar black Maserati. Cade drove through the night, past Manhattan, past Brooklyn, heading east. Jessie recognized the route when they crossed the bridge, when Korean signs began appearing on both sides of the road, when the faint smell of kimchi and grilled meat drifted in the air. Flushing. They were going back to Flushing. Her heart beat faster when the car stopped in front of a familiar restaurant. The neon sign was still there, older now, dimmer. Golden Dragon, the place where everything started. "This is," Jessie whispered, her voice thick. Cade turned off the engine and looked at her. "The place where I found you. Or more accurately, where Asher found you." They stepped out and stood beneath the familiar awning. Rain began to fall in a light mist, like it had 5 years ago, as if the sky remembered too. Jessie looked through the glass and saw the counter where she used to wipe things down at 3 in the morning. Saw the door where a soaked 6-year-old boy had walked in and changed her life forever. 5 years ago, Cade said, his voice low and warm. "My son got lost in the rain. I didn't know how to raise him alone. I didn't know how to give him the love he needed. I thought I lost everything when Catherine died." He paused and met Jessie's eyes. "Then somehow, he found his way to you. A night shift waitress with no money, no power, nothing at all except a heart big enough to love a lost child." Jessie felt tears rise, and she didn't stop them. Cade stepped back, and to her shock he dropped to one knee on the wet ground. From inside his suit jacket he pulled out a small black velvet box and opened it. A diamond ring glittered under the neon light. "Jessie Morgan," his voice shook, and for the first time she saw him shake. "You saved my son. You saved me. You saved this whole empire from war. You gave me something all my money and power couldn't buy. You gave me a family. You gave me hope. You gave me love." He looked up at her, eyes blurred with tears. "Will you officially become family with me and Asher? Will you be my wife?" Jessie cried. Tears ran down her cheeks, mixing with the misting rain. Are you serious? I've never been more serious in my life." Jessie nodded, laughing through tears. "Yes, yes, yes." Cade rose, slid the ring onto her finger, and pulled her into his arms. They kissed under the Golden Dragon awning, under the soft rain, as if time were turning backward to that night 5 years ago. Then the restaurant door burst open. "Mom," Asher ran out, his face glowing, eyes bright. He had been waiting inside with Barrett for the past hour, as nervous as his father. "Mom, is it true? You're really going to be my mom? You'll stay with me and Dad forever, right?" Jessie dropped to her knees and held him tight, tears spilling freely. "I will be your mom. Forever. I promise." Cade wrapped his arms around both of them, and the 3 of them stood there under the awning of the small restaurant where everything began, holding each other in the rain, crying and laughing at the same time. Family. At last, they were a real family. The year 2026. Jessie Morgan Vitale, 34 years old, stood behind the register at Sugar and Spice, the Prospect Heights location, the place where everything began. She had been married to Cade for 2 years, but they had been a family long before that. Asher was 13 now, tall, handsome, getting ready to start high school. He still called her mom, still hugged her every morning before school, still asked her to tell him stories even though he was a teenager now. That afternoon the bakery was busy as usual. Mothers pushing strollers came in to rest their feet. Office workers stopped by for afternoon coffee. Couples sat by the window, murmuring private things to each other. Ordinary life. Peace. The thing Jessie once believed she would never have. She glanced out the window and saw the sky turning dark, gray clouds rolling in from the east. Her phone buzzed softly. A message from Asher. "Mom, it's going to rain hard this afternoon. Don't forget your umbrella. Love you." Jessie smiled and set the phone down. Her son, the boy who once got lost in the rain, was now the one reminding her to bring an umbrella. Life was strange. She looked around her small bakery and memory rose like a tide. She thought about what she had lost. Her mother, the gentle woman who taught her how to love without conditions, gone when Jessie was only 14. Her father, the weak man who made a mistake out of love, counting days in prison. Her ordinary childhood, the years that should have been carefree and happy, stolen by a cruel twist of fate. But she also thought about what she had gained. Cade, the most powerful man she had ever known, and yet the gentlest when he was with her and Asher. Asher, the lost boy who had found his way to her in a night of storm and rain. Now her son, the light of her life. This bakery, the small dream she once believed would never become real. And a family, a real family, the thing she once believed she didn't deserve to have. She thought about the trade-offs. Living in Cade's world was never completely safe. There were still private meetings. There were still men with dangerous eyes coming and going from the mansion. There were still nights when Cade came home late, and Jessie lay awake waiting. But she was also loved, protected, cherished in a way she had never been cherished before, and she thought about choices. That night, 7 years ago, she could have refused. She could have called the police. She could have turned away and pretended she hadn't seen a soaked little boy standing in the doorway of her restaurant. Her life would have kept going, normal, safe, and maybe very lonely, but she hadn't. She had taken that small, ice-cold hand, and everything had changed. Outside, the rain began to fall. The first drops struck the glass. Sliding down in thin streams, Jessie watched them and whispered the time that was forever burned into her soul. 2:47 in the morning. Just then, as if answering her memory, the doorbell rang. Soaked from head to toe, black hair plastered to his forehead, school uniform drenched with rain. A 13-year-old boy, but in that moment, he looked exactly like the 6-year-old from years ago, the boy who had stepped into her life on a night of storm and rain and never truly left. Asher grinned, the smile Jessie loved more than anything in the world. "Mom, I forgot my umbrella." Jessie laughed and opened her arms wide. "Come here, sweetheart." Asher ran to her and hugged her hard, soaking her shirt. She didn't care. She only held her son tight, kissed his forehead, and looked out the window where the rain kept falling. Some rainy nights will change your life. Some lost boys will lead you to the place you belong. And some decisions made at 3 in the morning will give you a family. The rain kept falling against the glass. But this time, Jessie wasn't alone. She had Asher in her arms. She had Cade waiting at home. She had a family. And that was all she needed. Jessie and Asher's story had come to a close, but the lesson it left behind would last. Sometimes the smallest moments change an entire life. Sometimes kindness to a stranger can open a door to the most extraordinary things. Sometimes family isn't the people who share your blood, but the people who choose to love each other, choose to stay, choose never to let go no matter how hard life gets. Jessie had lost so much, but she had found so much too. She proved that the past doesn't define the future, that where you come from doesn't decide your destiny, and that true love has the power to heal every wound. Thank you for staying with this story all the way to the end. If Jessie and Asher's story touched your heart, leave us a comment and tell us, how did you feel following their journey? Have you ever had a moment in your life where one small decision changed everything? We would love to hear your stories, your feelings from the deepest part of your heart. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit like, share it with your friends and family, and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the emotional stories we bring you every day. Every subscription, every like, every share is a huge motivation for us to keep creating high-quality content. We wish all of you watching this video strong health, a joyful life, and peace every day. We hope that no matter how hard life gets, you will always keep a warm heart and kindness toward the people around you, because maybe one day, that kindness will change your life, the way it changed Jesse's. Goodbye, and we'll see you in the next video.